upon you all, and Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining today's Quran study, where by God's leave we will be reading from Surah 21, continuing from verses or Ayah 77, and God willing, ending at 112. So, as we begin, we seek refuge in God away from Satan the rejected. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. 77. We supported him against the people who rejected our revelations. They were evil people, so we drowned them all. And David and Solomon, when they once ruled with regard to someone's crop that was destroyed by another sheep, we witnessed their judgment. We granted Solomon the correct understanding, though we endowed both of them with wisdom and knowledge. We committed the mountains to serve David in glorifying God, as well as the birds. This is what we did. And we taught him the skill of making shields to protect you in war. Are you then thankful? For Solomon we committed the wind gusting and blowing at his disposal. We could direct it as he wished. He could direct it as he wished, to whatever land he chose, and we blessed such land for him. We are fully aware of all things. And of the devils were there, 82. And of the devils there were those who would die for him, to harvest the sea, or do whatever else he commanded to do. We committed them in his service. And Job implored his Lord, adversity has befallen me, and of all the merciful ones, you are the most merciful. We responded to him, relieved his adversity, and restored his family for him, even twice as much. That was a mercy from us, and a reminder for the worshippers. Also Ismail, Idris, Zalkifl, all were steadfast, patient. We admitted them into our mercy, for they were righteous. So, quite a bit I read there. We have a lot of examples that God is giving us, right? At 77, this is a continuation from 76, where God is giving an example of Noah, right? Where God supported Noah against the people who rejected God's revelations. And they were evil people, so God drowned them all. Then God continues, David and Solomon, right, were another example. Then we had Job, right, and then God continues with, there's a continuation of these examples. We have Ismail, we have Idris, we have Zalkifl, right? God is giving all these examples. And in these verses, and in these examples of these prophets and messengers, who are shown to have a facing of adversity and a challenge, a hardship. It shows that they held steadfast, were perseverant, and then there was a result that God provided, right? So with Noah, we know that Noah was tested by being ostracized in his community, right? He implored many people, to revere God, to put God first, to submit to God. And of course, they ostracized him. They shunned him. They put him away. And he did it loudly. He proclaimed loudly. He did it in private. No matter what he did, Noah would constantly try to advocate God and reverencing him and glorifying him. Yet the community pushed him away. Laughing at him, mocking him, right? And in the face of that mocking, God relieved his adversity. God, made it a detriment, this mocking of God's revelations, a detriment to those people and, drowned them, right? For a lack of any other explanation, right? So we have the cause and the effect, right? A beautiful example. Then it continues. David and Solomon. What were they tested by? Well, they were tested by the materials of this world. Right? David and Solomon. Solomon especially granted, innumerable, incalculable provisions and blessings and materials of this world, right? And, one could be arrogant and say, where's the test in that, right? Like, you're given such an easy life. That's not the case at all. David and Solomon could have turned arrogant, egotistical, and in turn be very unappreciative and ungrateful. But that's not the case, right? They could have, the two examples in the Quran of people who were given a lot of provisions and turned ungrateful and unappreciative is Qarun, the slave driver from Moses' time, or the farmer in 1832, where he's saying to his neighbor, I demand more respect because of the wealth I have. It's these thoughts, this arrogance, this ego that these people who have a lot of provisions, they put themselves up to a higher standard, demanding respect and not being humble. But David and Solomon, they were given the same test as Qarun, the same test as this farmer, even more so, right? And they were steadfast, they were firm, they were humble, regardless of the provisions that were given to them. And God noticed that they were equitable judges in this one example, right? So there was a cause, there was a test. God put them through this test, and they came out with a good solution, a good conclusion. They were steadfast, they were persevering, just like Noah with his test. And how did God bless him? Well, he blessed him with knowledge and understanding and the ability to essentially command the various aspects of nature itself in the glorification of God, right? What a blessing, right? So we have two examples. Then alternatively, God gives another example, Job, right? In 83, right? Who was tested not by the giving of provisions, but by the adversity, right? The taking away of provisions. And Job could have, in a personable, in a worldly plane, he could have given in to a victimhood mentality. He could have been despondent. He could have concluded that life's unfair or whatever you see all around you, right? But that's not the case. That's not the case at all, right? Once these things were taken away from him, what was Job's response? Where is it? In 83, Job implores his Lord and says, "Adversity has befallen me, and of all the merciful ones, you are the most merciful." So his response wasn't being despondent. His response wasn't being arrogant or egotistical. His response was being humble and being steadfast in his glorification to God. And how did God respond? Right? Well, he blessed him with provisions. He alleviated that adversity. He took away that hardship. And like this is kind of echoed in Surah 11, verse 9, where God tells us, whenever we bless the human being with mercy from us, then remove it, he turns despondent and unappreciative. Job could have been unresponsive. He could have been unappreciative. And he could have been, with that victimhood mentality. But instead we see this beautiful example of what a true submitter does when faced with adversity. Job implores God, Yeah, he accepts the fact that adversity has befallen him, but then praises him and says, "Of all the merciful ones, you are the most merciful." And of course, as God rewards Job for this steadfastness, right? And we have these examples, right? What sets these prophets and these messengers apart from us as individuals here in this Quran study is that they are the example of what to do when faced with the tests in our lives, right? We have many times where we are tested by the provisions of getting provisions or them being taken away, or being ostracized by society for our beliefs, right? These are very common conflicts within our lives that we can correspond with. We can understand. We can relate, right? But God gives us the example. However, with these prophets, with these messengers, there was no precedent, right? They came to the correct conclusion in the end due to their own volition, due to their own conviction, due to their own steadfastness. But in contrast, this is a massive blessing for us and a mercy from God that he has granted us as a community of submitters, because he provides us that precedent. We don't have to have guesswork. We don't have to come to our own conclusion. God lays out the plan specifically. If you are faced with this problem, don't worry. It's happened before. Look at Job, look at Solomon, look at David, look at Noah, look at Abraham. He gives us all these precedents. He says, if you're in this type of situation, this is the good path and this is the bad path. And he gives conclusions. He gives the cause and effect for both solutions, right? And, that's a beautiful guarantee. It's a beautiful guarantee of what God will give us should we choose either way, right? If we are steadfast, humble, and appreciative, regardless of the test. But as you will see and continue in the further verses, this isn't where God's grace and mercy ends for us as submitters, giving us this precedence. God continues in 87. And Zanun, Jonah, the one with N in his name, abandoned his mission in protest, thinking that we could not control him. So I'm going to just split this verse in between, as God gives the example of someone who abandoned God's path initially, right? Someone who did not initially submit wholeheartedly, and shows us that under the right circumstances, even a person like that, God's grace and mercy can redeem that person. The key, of course, as it will continue, is how that person comes to conclusion, as God continues in the example of 87, right? So I'll read it again. Jonah abandoned his mission in protest, thinking that we could not control him. He ended up imploring from the darkness of the big fish's belly. So Jonah says, "There is no God other than you. Be you glorified. I have committed a gross sin." God responds in this imploring. In 88, God says, "We responded to him and saved him from the crisis. We thus save the believers." All praise be to God, most gracious, most merciful. This is a beautiful example on all fronts. You see with Noah, we see with Solomon, David, and Job. We're given these examples of what the best response is of these trials and tribulations, right? Truly, these are the best examples of what humanity has done when facing adversity. Now, when we read this as just common people who have our flaws, and we can definitely see that we fall short of God's grace, right? We can be intimidated by these examples of Abraham, of Noah, of Solomon, of David, right? And in contrast, we feel ourselves unworthy, and it almost can be an insurmountable obstacle of our own failure in comparison to these great examples of these people who've set a precedent before us. So what does God do in his grace and mercy? He gives us an example of someone who did fall short, right? Just as we can have that feeling in reading the aforementioned examples, it shows that even at that stage, it's how we react that we also have a chance to be redeemable by God's leave, as long as we repent and seek forgiveness and strive to change and glorify God continuously, God alone. So, what a beautiful example. We're given the best of examples, and then we're shown, hey, if you fall short, it's how you respond, right? And this message is echoed in Surah 39, verses 49 to 53, right? And I'll read it here. So in 49, God tells us, if the human is touched by adversity, he implores us. But as soon as we bestow a blessing upon him, he says, I attain this because of my own cleverness. Indeed, this is only a test, but most of them do not know. Those before them have uttered the same thing, and their earnings did not help them in the least. They suffered the consequences of their evil works. Similarly, the transgressors among the present generation will suffer the consequences of their evil works. They cannot escape. Do they not realize that God is the one who increases the provisions for whomever he chooses and withholds? These are lessons for people who believe. God's infinite mercy, as the messenger says. 53, proclaim, O my servants, who exceeded the limits, never despair of God's mercy, for God forgives all sins. He is forgiver most merciful. So we can see that contrast. We can see that direct correlation of, okay, Solomon and David, who had all these provisions given to them, they could have been like Karun and the farmer. As God says, I attained this because of my own cleverness. That's what people say, right? But that's not what happened. They were steadfast, right? And then it goes to show that even if we transgress those limits, if we respond by recognizing the fault in our own actions, God gives us that guarantee and says, "Oh, my servants who exceeded the limits, never despair of God's mercy. For God forgives all sins. He is forgiver, most merciful." What a comfort and a grace that God has given us, right? As these examples. Regardless of the circumstances that brought us to this exact moment, we are all redeemable by God's leave if we sincerely repent and glorify God alone. So God willing, I'll continue in 89. And Zechariah implored his Lord, "My Lord, do not keep me without an heir, though you are the best inheritor." We responded to him and granted him John. We fixed his wife for him, that is, because they used to hasten to work righteousness and implored us in situations of joy as well as fear. To us they were reverent. As for the one who maintained her virginity, we blew into her from our spirit, and thus we made her and her son a portent for the whole world. So we see a continuation of the story. And when I was reading this and preparing for this this Quran study, I saw these two verses as almost like a palate cleanser, a spiritual palate cleanser, a sorbet, right? Because we got this heavy message, right, beforehand of, we can fall short. We can see these examples of what will redeem us in the end, right? And it's very heavy. We see these examples of what is to be, of the great human potential of just striving, and then even if you do fall short, God can still redeem us if we choose to repent and glorify him alone, right? And we have this heavy message, and then God gives us, right after that, the example of Zechariah and Mary, right? So Zechariah is shown as a very reverent man who was challenged with a life of sterility between him and his wife, right? Yet, regardless of that, he remained steadfast. He proved to himself, he proved to his wife, in all intents and purposes, God knew that he didn't need children to glorify God. He didn't need these provisions that he so wanted. He did it regardless. And even though all human hope, right, from an earthly plane, all hope is gone, right? Like, he's an old man, his wife is an old woman, right? There's, from the human perspective, there's no chance. Yet he still has hope, right? And continue to implore God, right? And as a result, God blessed him with John, right? Who we know to be not only a great son for Zechariah, but a phenomenal servant and submitter to God alone. What a blessing, right? What a blessing. So alternatively, we see Mary come up afterwards. And in all intents and purposes, from a human perspective, she probably didn't want to be pregnant at that exact point in time, right? Like, from an earthly perspective. She was a single woman, right? In a time where, single mothers were quite a despicable sight. And then, yet Mary remained steadfast and glorified God through the examples seen throughout the Quran. And it could be implied with the context of the previous verses of these examples, that God blessed her with arguably not only the best son a single mother could have, right, Jesus, but a support in this worldly life. This is exemplified in 1930, where God tells us that Jesus spoke from the crib, right? The first sight of Mary having a child, everybody's shocked and awed, your dad Aaron was never a transgressor like this. Like, what are you doing, right? People were aghast. People were shocked that this Mary, who previously showed to be a very good judge of character, a very committed servant to God, and now they see this This woman with a child and no father, right? And what does God do? God says, don't worry, vow silence, point to the crib, right? In 1930. And then Jesus speaks, and tells everybody as an infant, like, imagine a couple of days old infant speaking to you in full words, right? Full description that he's God's servant, right? What a blessing. What a blessing for Mary. Something seemingly impossible. Like, up to that point, you could argue it would have been impossible to alleviate such an adversity. But God gave a way through her son. So we have a test of provisions with Noah, with Solomon, with Job, and we have this dichotomy of one type of test with money and provisions, and then we have this dichotomy of a test through children, Zechariah and Mary. And this can be echoed in this exact message right here. This dichotomy of tests is echoed in Surah 8, verses 28 to 29, where God tells us, you should know that your money and your children are a test, and God possesses a great recompense. O you who believe, if you reverence God, he will enlighten you, remit your sins, and forgive you. God possesses infinite grace. What a blessing, right? Not only does God give us perfect examples of how we should react, regardless of the test we are given, whether it be money or children, but he gives us the conclusion of what happens should we choose. So God willing, I'll continue on verse 92, Surah 21. Your congregation is but one congregation, and I alone am your Lord. You shall worship me alone. However, they divided themselves into disputing religions. All of them will come back to us for judgment. So, as believers, as submitters, we know there are truly only two religions. One is based off of truth, and one is based off of falsehood. So monotheism, which is, this word is derived from Latin mono, meaning one, and theos, meaning God or deity. So the belief in one God, right? God alone. La ilaha illallah, right? We all know this as submitters. Even in the old scripture, first commandment, there's only one God, worship him alone, right? This is a continuation. We see this message throughout since Abraham and onwards, right? And then there's the religion of falsehood, polytheism or idolatry. And this is derived from the Latin word polis or polis, meaning many or much, and then of course theo, meaning God, right? Now we know monotheism is the only religion that has been perfected over time, right? It never contradicts itself. Through scripture, from prophet to messenger, God's light is refined, right? And there's no contradiction to the message. Don't get me wrong, man has corrupted many of the scriptures. However, through the light of the Quran, through God's grace, we can see where the truth lies and where the falsehood is, right? We use it as a filter. By the grace of God, unfortunately, I didn't take the verse out, but God willing, many people will remember. There's a verse where it says, people will try to hide the light of God, but God insists on refining it, right? Beautiful. And I'm paraphrasing, may I add. That's not exactly verbatim, right? So that's how we can tell God's religion of monotheism is truth. And polytheism, right, where this is a perversion of Satan, right? This is in his pursuit to make as many people unappreciative of God's grace, and in turn show his ability to be a false deity, right? Continuously inspires man to take God's message, which is truth, and distort it with myths of intercession or falsehoods. Brother, we're on verse 93, Surah 21. So somebody just put it in chat. No problem. And I'm just explaining, so let me recap. Verse 93, It says, however, they divided themselves into disputing religions. All of them will come back to them. So to recap, monotheism, polytheism. Monotheism, one God, the religion of truth, and polytheism, and everything that, all the sects that have divided because of polytheism, are due to Satan's pursuit of leading astray many, many people, to show that many people will be unappreciative of God's grace. And we see God's grace through the examples that we've read already, right? And of course, Satan wants to prove himself as a false deity, as I was mentioning. So how does he do it? He can't even create something new. You'll notice this. Satan, in all his religions, in all his polytheism, in his myths of intercession and other falsehoods that he propagates in other religions, like any lie or falsehood, it's contradictory, right? There's no continuity, there's no evolving, there's no refinement. It's constantly being reevaluated, constantly being reimagined, just like any liar, right? They can't hold their story straight, right? And evidently, there's many contradictions, right? So sects, or this division into disputing religions, are fabricated beliefs that stray away from monotheism, or the religion of submitting to God alone. Ironically, and I want to add this, the only thing holding these polytheistic religions together, these lies together, is God's creation in Scripture. They have to attach to truth for them to be solid, or else they weak apart. If it was just the lies, if it was just the falsehood, they would be dissipated immediately. But they hold on to the truth, right? So that they grasp on, and that's how these people believe in these things, because there is truth in it. And I've said this analogy many times. I've said the saying many times. Any believable lie must be steeped in truth. Otherwise, nobody would believe it. So we see that here, and that's the disputing sects that God says, right? And all of them will come back to us for judgment, right? These people who have turned away from God's revelation, turned away from submitting and glorifying God alone. These people will see their belief and their propagating of falsehood on the day of judgment. But conversely, in 94, God says, as for those who work righteousness, while believing, their work will not go to waste. We are recording it. So, the contrast, right? There's always a contrast. What will happen if you choose cause and effect, right? Those who are righteous, those who propagate truth, those who submit to God alone, or those who want to compromise, right? Who want to, believe in falsehood, right? God willing, I'll continue, 95. It is forbidden for any community we had annihilated to return to the end of the world. So that's what is prefaced here, right? So God tells us it is forbidden for any community we had annihilated to return. Not until Gog and Magog reappear. Will they return. They will come from every direction. That is when the inevitable prophecy will come to pass and the disbelievers will stare in horror. Woe to us! We have been oblivious. Indeed, we have been wicked. So, God gives us another promise in the scripture that we've read, that no community will reappear until Gog and Magog, right? And God does this to lead on the disbelievers, right? To lead on Satan and all his constituents. To say, okay, lead them on into their own perversions, into their own falsehoods, into their own lies, and to see the destruction that they have wrought upon themselves. And to see where it escalates, right? Because, and you'll see this, even talking in today's day and age, when you talk to these people, right, who submit to the lies into their life, right? They've destructed themselves spiritually, physically, in many ways. And yet they do it thinking they are virtuous with the veil of virtue, right? And it ultimately comes down to destruction. because, of course, nothing can be upheld without truth, right? As soon as you delve more and more into falsehood, it's chaos. It's utter chaos. There's no order to it, right? Just like the sects that have deviated from the truth of monotheism, right? The more they deviate, the more destructive they are, right? And this is the inevitable prophecy, right? They'll be shocked in terror. They'll be shocked in horror, as it is said in 97, right? They'll see what they have brought on by their own volition, by their own conclusions, by following falsehood. They'll see that it was all out of vanity. It was all pointless. It was like, as God says, like a thin layer on a rock that gets blown away. Yes, brother. Do you know what? Thank you for mentioning that, because I took this out of the actual verse. So God willing, I'll read the footnote of 96. 96. So there's a footnote where the messenger says, 2196, by the year 2270 AD, thanks to God's mathematical miracle in the Quran, Appendix 1, America will be the heart of Islam, and billions around the globe will have believed in the Quran. And there's subsequent proofs that God has given through the messenger. Surah 9:33, Surah 41:53, Surah 48:28, and Surah 61:9. Gog and Magog, and in parenthesis it says allegorical names of villainous communities, will be the only bastions of heathenism, and they will attack the submitters. That is when the world will end. 1587, 1894, and Appendix 25. Gog and Magog are mentioned in 1894 and 2196, 17 verses before the end of each surah. This may indicate the time of their appearance. So, all praise be to God. You know, not only do we have the proof of the message, you know, like the Quran, but it's substantiated by the mathematical miracle that Dr. Rashad Khalifa, by God's leave, was able to see, right? The miracle of 19, and many other miracles that we see in the Quran substantiate the fact that this will come to pass. This prophecy will come to pass in the year 2270, right? And we kind of see that now. Ironically, yesterday I was talking with a couple of other submitters, and somebody said, "Oh, you know, there is no war." Well, there is a war. It's an ideological war, right? As Dr. Rashad Khalifa has said, right? There is much disbelief that is being propagated, much falsehood that is being propagated, but inevitably, these people will stare in horror, right? In the end. So, God willing, I'll continue in 98, where God, after God has. I'll read again 97. That is when the inevitable prophecy will come to pass, and the disbelievers will stare in horror. Woe to us! We have been oblivious. Indeed, we have been wicked. You and the idols you worship beside God will be fuel for hell. This is your inevitable destiny. If those were gods, they would have not ended up in hell. All its inhabitants abide in it forever. They will sigh and groan therein. They will have no access to any news. As for those who deserved our magnificent rewards, they will be protected from it. The righteous. They will not hear its hissing. They will enjoy an abode where they can get everything they desire forever. The great horror will not worry them, and the angels will receive them joyfully. This is your day that has been promised to you, the day of resurrection. On that day, we will fold the heaven like the folding of a book. Just as we initiated the first creation, we will repeat it. This is our promise. We will certainly carry it out. All praise be to God. Lord of the universes. So we see so far, and we're coming to the end of the study, God willing. You see this contrast of what it takes to be a true submitter, redeemed by God, and then we see what happens to the strayers, right? And the more you delve into how God's grace and mercy, like this world, this universe has been created for us to be redeemed. What a grace and mercy. God has given us precedences, like a precedent to what will happen. He has outlaid for us, this community, right now as we speak. He has outlaid for us the example of what will happen if we choose to submit to God or we don't. If we adhere and prescribe to God's truth or we compromise with falsehood. Is it any wonder at the end of this that those who have been given grace after mercy, grace after mercy, grace after mercy, and threw that all away, that they should end up in hell? Remorseful? Not really, right? You know, like, fool me once, as they, for us, you know, like there's like a common saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? Saying like you only have one chance. God has given multiple chances. Far more grace and far more mercy than any human being would ever give anybody else. And he does it for us. And yet, in the end, the majority of people are still unappreciative, right? And yeah, what a horror it would be for the veil of this illusion of life to be lifted and you to see everything for what it is. To see the truth of the matter, to see that this is a test, and you failed it. What a horror. What a horrible day, you know? But not for the righteous, who recognized it, right? What a blessing. So God willing, I'll continue 105. We have decreed in Psalms, as well as in other scriptures, that the earth shall be inherited by my righteous worshippers. This is a proclamation for the people who are worshippers. We have sent you out of mercy from us towards the whole world. Proclaim, I've been given divine inspiration that your God is one God. Will you then submit? If they turn away, then say, I've warned you sufficiently, and I have no idea how soon or late the retribution will come to you. He is fully aware of your public utterances, and he is fully aware of everything you conceal. For all that I know, this world is a test for you, and a temporary enjoyment. Seek, my Lord, your judgment is the absolute justice. Our Lord is the most gracious. Only his help is sought in the face of your claims. So, we have been given a beautiful precedent. We have been given beautiful examples by God, and it is our job to propagate the truth, to proclaim the divine inspiration that we have been given through his scripture, through his grace, and through his mercy, and to warn those who haven't been warned, right? The day is coming. It will seem only like an hour once it's all done and over with. Time is relative, as we know. Nothing is more important than our salvation and redemption. And God willing, we as a community will strive in God's cause to submit towards him alone. With that being said, that is the end of today's Quran study, or the verses. God willing, we'll continue with questions and open dialogue. God bless you all.
I'm sure. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
That was fantastic. God bless you, Justin. That was amazing. God bless you. Praise be to God.
Praise be to God. Thank you. Praise be to God.
God bless you all.
And thank you so much for Brother Solomon streaming this. We got over 20 people watching live. This is amazing. We got on other platform, 20 people are watching very intently. This is fantastic. Praise be to God. May God reward you for your striving.
Mashallah. So, just to give you guys an introduction in terms of the format, so God willing, when we have a teacher, they read 2 pages, and then we discuss, we have comments and questions on the verses we read, and then after we are done discussing those verses that we read, then we go towards discussing any off-topic comments or questions. anybody has, and we address those questions. Mashallah, thank you all for joining. Mashallah, we have Brother Naveed joining us for the first time today. We have Brother Raphael. So welcome, guys. Mashallah. So thank you for joining. So God will continue if anybody has any comments or questions.
Thank you, Brother, for having me. God bless you guys. Praise be to God.
Yeah, Mashallah, I want to comment on some of these verses regarding Solomon here. God granted him so many blessings here, as we can see. And imagine if, like, someone, like you said, these are great examples for us to learn from. Really, nice standards in place for us to measure ourselves against, Like, we're used to measuring ourselves with the people outside that we go and see on a day-to-day basis, and we think that we're doing really great because we're comparing ourselves to these people, right? But a real measuring, scale would be the examples that God has provided for us, the good examples that God has provided for us to follow in the Quran, and the great lessons for us to learn from. And when we do compare to that, it does help us put things in better perspective. Obviously, we don't idolize anybody because we're just humans like us, but God preserved their history for us to learn from, and to show us that this is how we should behave. There's also, at the same time, there's also mistakes that they made, and so those are also reminders for us. One, to understand that these people were not, flawless. They were humans. They were not angels. They could, fall into sin unknowingly as well, and they repented for them. But as far as them being messengers, they brought the truth from God. They didn't make up things. They took God's revelation seriously, and they tried to follow as best as they could. But at the same time, they were also human. So, as humans, sometimes we will end up, making mistakes. Like, Muhammad made a mistake. He ignored the blind man. He asked God, obviously, for forgiveness when he realized that. And so, when we fall into sin out of ignorance, and we repent to God, as mashallah, Brother Justin, you read earlier, God forgives all sins. So, people who exceeded the limits, they should not despair, right? But then there's also the idea where people will just commit sins, abusing God's forgiveness and thinking that, God will just overlook the sins because God is forgiver. Like, they start with maybe minor and then maybe they get used to committing sin, and then they just do it like it's no big deal and just think, yeah, God will just forgive everything. But the idea is that, if we knowingly are committing these sins, if we understand that something is a sin and we insist on it, then we have to pay the price. The price is our happiness. The price is the consequences, But when you commit sins unknowingly, you ask God for forgiveness. God knows that you didn't mean it. He'll forgive you. He's so merciful, because he wants us to succeed. He knows that people who are, intentionally striving towards redemption, God is so merciful and kind towards us that he will forgive us. And this is why, he has put all these examples too for us to learn from. And especially with David and Solomon, as I was saying earlier, like, we see the amount of resources that God had blessed David and Solomon with, the language, understanding of the language of the birds, and, how the mountains were glorified with David, how he gave him the Psalms, how he gave Solomon such a huge kingdom. He gave him, like, oil wells and oil fields, and like, the jinns, to working for him as servants in his kingdom. They were devils even, that were not, submitted jinn, but they were in his service. He had an army that was supposed to work for him, and they had no choice. They had to work for him. God, made it such that they did do whatever they were commanded to do, because imagine like if they're jinns and they go haywire, and they could cause so much damage and chaos, but they were subservient at that time to doing the things for them. And so imagine like the amount of power that these people had, but at the same time, like you can see their level of humility and how they were still submitted to God. They were not arrogant or egotistical, as you can see most people. Once they get a little bit of power, they could turn into tyrants very quickly and become egotistical and make their egos their God. And we have Satan's example as a fact, because God gave him powers and he started thinking that, he was someone in his own right, and which led us to where we are now. But praise be to God. I mean, these are reminders for us to understand that, everything comes from God, and the fact that also, Solomon's example is, part of your admission test, being blessed with resources, material wealth to the extreme, where, you could be tested to see whether you would forget God at that time, transgress, or you'd continue to worship God alone. And, Solomon, throughout history, we see that he was consistently persevering and observing God and trying to nullify any claims from Satan that he loved anything else more than God. We have the example of him getting rid of his horses just to nullify Satan's claim, for example, right? Inshallah.
Yeah, all praise be to God. It remind me when you were explaining that, God tells us, like, if the world was inhabited by angels, he would send down angels to send the message. Like, it's truly a grace and mercy that he uses human beings with flaws and all to propagate the message, to show that, there's an example of what a good submitter can be, and it's attainable with the flaws that you have, right? God has given so many messengers and so many prophets the message to propagate, to let us know, and to show us examples of where they've made mistakes, but they were still redeemed and still considered extreme examples, even though they had those flaws, especially because they repented and reformed and submitted to God alone and glorified Him, and continue to do so until their end, right? So, yeah, beautiful example that God gives us in terms of His grace and mercy.
Sure. I also have a question regarding, it's a question / comment, right? So regarding David and Solomon here, it says, we granted Solomon the correct understanding, though we endowed both of them with wisdom and knowledge, right? So these are, both of these are messengers of God, right? And then God says that one of them was granted the correct understanding regarding, dispute that they had about someone's crop destroyed by another sheep. So what do you guys think about that? Yeah, I mean, just in case anybody has any thoughts, I'm sure don't feel obligated. Okay. Much interesting also that, right after the example of Solomon, we're given the example of Job, right, which was the exact opposite, right? And so we know that these are the kinds of things that, you and I can expect to be tested with as we go through admissions tests. When we claim to become submitters, we go through a series of tests, and these things are these things are really designed to expose our true qualities, as God says in the Quran. So God really, I mean, if you think about it, right, God already knows everything about me and you. Like, He knows all our qualities, what my capacity is, what I can handle, what I can't handle, and how I would respond in a certain situation. But yet, I am put through those circumstances for myself and for the sake of the day of judgment. We're put through these situations so that no one can say on the day of judgment that his God's decision was, like unjust or anything like that, right? I mean, we will have the proven results, right? But with uh, proper witnessing of everything that we did. If someone was let's say killed, for just the reason that if you let this person live, they would have committed, let's say, mass murders or something like that. But if they never committed it, I mean, how can you justify such a decision? It would never work. And so God allows these things to happen, so that people who commit, let's say, evil things on earth will be allowed to commit evil things, and at the same time, people who are gonna persevere, be righteous, pass these tests, be proven worshippers of God. They're the ones who will go to paradise with the proof, right? On the day of judgment, we'll all have our record. Um, so this is interesting, But really, having said that, I mean, these tests that are designed, these are not meant to be easy, right? These are meant to really test us to our limits. So, like when people come into submission, sometimes people come with this mindset that they just want everything to be easy and they just want it to be over with as soon as possible, which is really just wishful thinking, right? But if you think about it realistically, we have to be prepared. Like we have to be mentally ready for these challenges, right? Because if you really want something, if you really love God, yeah, these things are going to come to us, and we really have to perfect ourselves. If we don't get rid of all these flaws and we don't prove ourselves, we will continue to be in the position where we are. So, we really want things to change. We have to work on ourselves, and but more importantly, we have to be aware that now that we've become submitters, these things will happen. The end may take time. 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Right? It could take time for you to be put through these situations. I mean, it is a long time, right? And it says that the message of the covenant also talks about it at great length, and it says these things are not easy, but we have to ask for God's help, and more importantly, as I was saying, we need to be prepared that as these things happen, how we respond to them. It's not a walk in the park. Obviously, we were ignorant enough to think that it was going to be a walk in the park, and that's how we chose to come here and take the test. So may God help us and guide us through this. Thank you. Anyone else has any comments besides me and Justin? Huda, would you like to say a few words? I always like to take on for that. Sorry, Okay, so
verse 111. Verse 111 is a good reminder, just about the temporariness of this life. That this world is just a test, and so it's a good. It's a good reminder for. I like to think about for myself, just to put things in perspective. Because it's easy to get caught up and like the daily, stuff if you're not careful. I mean, like even in the last hour, you could be going through the day and you did good for like, let's say the first part of the day, making God your God, like dividing it into 15 minutes, and every 15 minutes I'll try to like aim for 100%, you know, thinking about God or doing zikr or just something. And then, but you know, it's there's this, we're just in this world, and there's so many things, you know, coming from so many different directions, and it's something I don't think as a submitter, like, we should let our guard down at all. And you know, so verses like this from the Quran should, you know, to me they serve as an excellent reminder in putting things in perspective and brittling our desires or any if we still struggle with those. I mean, for those who do against the, you know, the body or the flesh, you know, like for worldly ornaments and stuff, you know, just to keep that in check, or keep our jinn from, you know, trying to convince us otherwise. But, yeah, and in verse 102, it's like every time I've read this about it says they will not hear its hissing, they will enjoy it in abode there, where they can get everything they desire forever. So, you know, you see the hissing part, though. It's like, if y'all have ever heard of like,
kind of similar. You hear the stuff boiling up, right?
right.
Just to mention, there's the miscommunication. So that there have been times where people on Discord have tried to comment, but of course, because I'm streaming it on Jitsi, we're not unable to hear their comments. So my apologies to everybody on Discord who have tried to comment, but we just simply didn't hear you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, if anyone on Discord likes to join our study, they can request access. Go to one of the first they submitted.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on what you were saying earlier, Brother Suleiman, just about being tested and going through stuff, and you know, like, we all have flaws, and like, for me, it's, I think, you know, I guess what we want to put emphasis on, like, for myself, it's like, and I mean, I tell other people, even non-submitters, and I mean, they agree, even if they're from like different religious backgrounds, but it's kind of like the willingness to look within yourself. Because I know sometimes, like, it can be hard to examine oneself, but that's why I like the messenger. It wasn't until I heard what he was speaking, and I mean, we know he didn't bring anything new, so I know I'm pointing him out, but he just was elaborating on a verse from the Quran about examining ourselves. And so I've noticed, like, with my improvements and tough things I've gone through, it's, you have to take that really hard look, even if it hurts. I guess you could say your ego and among other things, or just like if you don't want to do something that you have to do, or change something within yourself. But that's always a good reminder, and it's exactly what I mean. You were saying earlier, Suleiman, it's not easy to do these things. There's a lot of people they aren't willing to take that look, that like deep critical look within themselves. Because people know themselves best. I mean, like when they see other people, like we know how we are, what we think, and so that's a lot of people aren't willing to do that. Like if you tell somebody, look, this is prohibited, you shouldn't do this, and they in their hearts they know, like let's say it could be an intoxicant or something, they're wanting to become a submitter, and you have to tell them, but you really have to like look at this stuff like it's gonna literally cost you your salvation. It's really scary because to think about something like that. I mean, it could be something else. It could be something, whatever.
I can hear audio, but it seems. Oh, hold on, I'm unmuted here. I can hear audio. However, there is a mix-up where you can't hear the audio of the Discord onto the YouTube.
The history of Zechariah and John. It also kind of looks like an admission test for Zechariah to, go through this period of time where he didn't have an heir, right? And for someone,
I'll comment to brothers who
don't give such blessing to this person for like X period of time, that they will despair, and so you could be put to the test by something like that. I mean, like an example, reduction in provisions, or not having a child, for example, in this case, or anything like that. And in his case, it seems like he was really tested to the point where he was really old, and his wife was sterile, right? And so, but we can see he passed his test, in the situation where he didn't despair because he implored God at that point, right? So that also to me shows that, you can't just say like, yeah, if God wants, I will have something, and then not ask God for it, and in your heart, you have kind of despair, like, oh, I'm not gonna get it. Like, why even bother asking God? I'm not gonna get it, or like, why raise my expectations? You could say, like, I'm not gonna get it, But he did. He asked God for it. He implored God, and he said, "My Lord, do not keep me without an heir. You are the best inheritor." And then God responds to him, and we see that many examples throughout the Quran where, we're told that we should never despair of God's mercy, and the only people who despair of God's mercy are the disbelievers, right? So, if you want something from God, don't despair if you don't get it. I mean, sometimes people will say that, oh, well, like, I want something, but, I asked God and I didn't get it, and maybe it's not good for me or something, and then, they just leave it, right? So, like, or say that, oh, that thing is not good anyways, like, I've seen before, like, there were people that they didn't have children, and they couldn't have children, and they're like, oh, why have children? Like, children don't make you happy, or whatever. But that's not the attitude, right? I mean, children can be a blessing for you if you're righteous from God, right? So, and you could be more optimistic and not despair of God's mercy, regardless of what your circumstances were. At least not say things like that, but to not despair of God's mercy, even if something medically happens to you where you feel like you no longer can have a child, like this woman in this case was sterile, right? And Zechariah was old to the point where he said he was gray-haired and his bones were brittle. I mean, that means like really it's like almost like a physical impossibility that they could ever conceive. And still he implored God for it, and God answered his prayer, right? So, but it also shows to me that for our circumstances to change in that way.
Where can't you hear, brother? Because like I'm on Discord and I can hear it. Like I don't understand.
You don't. So Solomon's sound kind of cuts out a little bit. There's other complications for you.
Really? Okay. Like, cause I can hear it. Sorry.
Yeah,
Go.
let me unmute him.
Okay.
So listen.
Ironically, he's not talking right now.
Is somebody else talking?
No, nobody's talking right now.
MashaAllah, brother, right?
Okay, Masha, brother Raphael, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Oh, I hear it. I hear it.
I don't really got nothing to say. I'm a submitter. I believe in the Quran. I've been following it for a while. Like
Here's the issue, brother. I'm the one
Quran has
streaming
to
the
match
system,
me
and I don't know how to do that.
to be in Quran.
We're having
So when you choose the stream option,
Yeah.
there's a little tick you have to press. Stream audio. It's called stream system audio. So it adds the audio too.
Oh, like for the Discord, you're saying?
Wait. Oh yeah, for Discord. Okay, no, because on Discord you're not the one streaming Solomon.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll tell Brother Suleiman. Hold on here. God willing.
When does the session end? Is it almost over?
There's
Explain,
like
so
now that's
just
like
following the Quran
the
straight.
conversation part. It kind of just until people stop talking, it just continues.
Oh, that's cool. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we got about 30 people here, so I was hoping people can talk to you about your talk,
Oh,
and answer questions and stuff.
well, God willing, I'll tell Brother Suleiman and see if we can kind of hook it up. Hold on here, Brother Naveed.
Yeah.
your accent. I was like, yeah, it looks like you're from LA.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Do you mind if I just interject quickly here? Brother Suleiman, like your audio, like just this stream's audio is very intermittent. It fluctuates quite a bit on Discord. A suggestion was given, please make the audio directly from the system instead of the microphone, and God willing, it won't cut out as much.
Yeah, I think it's not possible with the way Discord is. I don't think so.
So Brother Naveed said there is a way.
Okay, I'll take a look at it, God willing.
Yeah, God willing. Maybe talk to Brother Naveed, and then he can kind of direct you.
Yeah, welcome, brother Raphael.
Thank you, Brother John. Thank you. I'm here just because God has brought me here, God is everything to me, mashallah.
MashaAllah.
MashaAllah, praise be to God.
Praise be to God.
Okay, Brother Raphael, God willing, I will message you privately, give you my contact information, and you can talk to us further, God willing. We also congregate for Friday prayers and stuff, so.
Sounds good, brother. Yeah, that's the thing. I've been trying to, like, when I first got.
But then it's just something like God never let me get submitted to that. Like I was still
calling it sin and stuff like that. And then once I came across the messenger of the covenant, like everything changed. I left sin, but then there's no boss to go to, you know? And then I reached the message, huh? How did you still submission in the beginning? I just went through something. I finished like really like, I started like with the Mohammedans, like their religion, and then I just came across them like a video of the messenger of the covenant. Oh, okay. Just like I feel like God guided me at all. Yeah. And of course, God is always the one that guides me. I was over like it's been by myself. Like religious is nothing. It's just been me. So I had to leave my family actually because they believe in other things. It hasn't been easy, but it's just who I am. It's like drove me. Like I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Mm-hmm. How old are you?
I'm 24. I'm about to be 25 in May 29th.
Oh,
Yeah. God's been great, man. God,
yes, brother,
got me out of sin. Like it's been amazing, but it's just I haven't had.
No, it's
if
not.
there was a mosque
I'm not too sure as to why
alone, I would be there
it's
all the
not
time.
working.
But there's no mosque here. It's
Sorry?
just Mohammedans, you know. And God has told us, instructed
I
us
did
to
last
not
night, but I can
worship
try it again. Hold on
in
here.
those houses. So this is the only way that I was able to connect with believers, true believers.
Mm-hmm. So you said you contacted Mr. Tucson, and then what happened?
And they told me like that they could pick me up and stuff like that. But then I came across a video of yours saying like what they really believed in, and I couldn't believe it that they believed like in things other than the Quran, you know, like about cutting your private. What do you call that? Circumcision. Yeah, and that's not in the Quran. So I just couldn't really. Even though they said they could pick me up, I had to do it the right way, you know. Even though it was convenient for me, it's against God, you know. So I couldn't do it.
Praise be to God.
Praise be to God.
I sent the link to Brother Suleiman.
People here, would you be able to talk about can people ask you questions?
Yeah, God willing, but it's going to be awkward because I'm streaming this on YouTube, and if I, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's really weird. No, I hear you. So maybe we can wait for that to finish.
God willing.
But everyone's really interested. Your talk was fantastic. I think everybody loved it. And, here's Philip's back.
I also think verse 105, so it's been decreed in previous scriptures, the Psalms, as well as other scriptures, that the earth shall be inherited by my righteous worshipers. And I mean, it's right there in like, the Bible, or not the Bible, but both within the Bible, the Psalms. But if you tell people, like some Christians, if you tell them to be righteous, they'll argue with you and say righteousness is unattainable because I guess they don't like to work hard, or they're just apathetic about it. They want to be on some type of idol to get the easy way out. It's like saying before, it's like like the get out of jail free card you get in Monopoly. If you go to jail, you can sometimes you can get lucky. You can get one of these cards. So that's kind of like what they're doing. is essentially. And further down, 108, good too, because it's telling us to proclaim. It's basically telling them to proclaim. I mean, this goes for any submitter, not just like prophets and messengers, about God being one God and then asking them to submit. So I think this is really important too, because it's like, maybe depending on what background we come in, it could be from traditional Islam or Judaism, for that matter, or post, let's say online, this and that. It's important to spread this message, not forcefully, not. You just invite. That's basically as the Quran said. It's like if they disbelieve, and it said your sole mission is to deliver this message, and then that's all you have to do. You don't have to force these people to believe, but it's I guess sometimes like when I was first starting out in submission, it was a little. It felt like a daunting task because people think you're crazy, or people could think many things about you, especially your family or friends and stuff, and think that you're. They feel sorry, they even tell you they feel bad for you, like you're going to hell or something, just because you disown their idols. But this is, everybody, we're all human, and so you might lose some friends, but these people aren't friends in the first place. But I think it's a test of the ego and also like social pressure as well, because you could be ostracized to an extent, but at the end of the day, it's if you love God the most, it's Lord, you'll do this, and then you'll happily look forward to doing stuff like this.
Yes, I can hear you, brother.
That's all I have.
Oh, what just happened?
Yeah, I don't know. Solomon's unmuted though. Yeah, if it's just 2 or 3 people and they're down there, you can just bring them on here. I think people are asking how come they don't just come on. Join us.
I don't know how we would do that, to be honest.
Just have a couple more. I don't know, whoever's talking, the 2-3 people, just bring them to VC3. Just come on Discord.
Bring it up to Brother Suleiman, because he's more technically savvy than I am.
Yeah, no, I understand. God bless you, brother. You did a fantastic, speech or talk.
By God's grace, thank you.
Everybody enjoyed it. We have 30 people here. This is Brother Justin, by the way. This is a fantastic submitter from Canada. I just met him last night, believe it or not, but he's already my brother. This is the real family. That's submitters.
Oh, thank you, brother. It just so that way I'm not rude to this YouTube. Please forgive me. I'm in an awkward position here. I'm going to. Brother Suleiman says, yeah, tell Naveed he can stream next time if he likes. God willing, just so that way we don't have this mess.
Yeah. It's the first time trying to collaborate, but yeah, I think we should be open to ideas and. People are really interested in what we can do.
And it looks like we have a comment from somebody in the chat from YouTube. They quoted verse 30 or verse 22. I guess this would be off topic from Surah 31. Yep. It says, "The strongest bond, those who submit completely to God while leading a righteous life, have gotten hold of the strongest bond. For God is in full control of all things." Yeah, that's good, brother.
Idiots. Oh, sorry.
What happened? Did I hear idiot? Or am I just hearing things?
Yeah.
Idea or?
Yeah, I said it's a great idea.
Oh, it's something.
Okay, so I think what happened was, so when we stopped the stream, we didn't restart it, so it didn't go on YouTube.
The stream we just didn't go on YouTube?
No.
Well, very valid point. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of silly, eh?
No, I mean, I think I see it on YouTube right now.
No.
Looking at something.
No. It's the first one was for 45 minutes, right? That one was there, and I don't think the new one. Did you actually start it the second time?
It's still continuing, brother. It says stop streaming. That's my only option.
Okay. Wait a second, man. Why is it not showing?
Yeah, it's still on YouTube.
Live. Okay. Yeah, weird. Okay, so you know what we can do is we can just give them the link, and one of them can just stream it on their Discord, right?
What, the Jitsi link, you're saying?
Yeah. No, not the Jitsi link. No, not the Jitsi link. The
YouTube?
Yeah.
Yeah, God willing. Like, I don't know. This is too confusing for me. I just figured out OBS.
Yeah, exactly. We can just send them the thing, and any one of them can stream it, right?
God willing.
To the rest of them. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but I don't know. Does anybody have any other questions or concerns?
Yeah. So, I don't have any concerns, but I do have some comments because we also read a bunch about the end of the world, and so I think John and I were having this discussion about the end of the world the other day. Actually, also I wanted to say, actually there's actually a song also in the album. Well, let me start first by saying that we have this first album out called The Submitters, which has all these songs and zikr, and one of them is about the end of the world, and it mentions Gog and Magog. It just reminded me of this song, but I wanted to announce here for people to go ahead and they can listen to it on Apple Music and stuff, and I think it'll also be available shortly on like Spotify and YouTube Music and other platforms, so they can listen to it, God willing. And so about Gog and Magog, we were talking, right? And so we can see here that in the footnote it talks about the allegorical communities, villainous communities, right? And so there has been this prevalent idea, especially here in North America, where these predominantly like Christian or evangelical Christians, I think for the most part, have been spreading this idea that it's going to be China and Russia that are the two communities. Now the thing is, from the Quran, we don't really know who those people are, and secondly, they could be in China and Russia, but they're not the Chinese and Russians right now that we know, because those people, the Gog and Magog, they are actually underground, right? And so God says when that wall crumbles, they're going to come out. Those communities are not like living now as in other countries, as we know, right? So that's a wrong idea that has been spread, and people may accept it without really thinking. But but if you think about it, they could be anywhere in the world. We don't really know. But the thing is, they are not. They're not out right now. Like we can't like point to a certain nation and say it's them because those people are underground. But it's interesting that when this happened, your comment about the war, It's interesting because when I actually made that comment, exact same comment, and someone told me that they said that what is it? They said that, well, yeah, they said that they will attack them, but it doesn't mean there's going to be war. So the thing is, if they're going to attack them, they're going to attack them in 10 years before the end of the world. What is going to happen, right? You can't say, well, they're going to attack them, but there's not going to be any war. Of course, there's someone attacks you, there's going to be fighting, there's going to be something, right? So, yeah, that's kind of weird that, people sometimes go to these extreme lengths to try to defend something that doesn't make sense. But, because the thing is that the messenger did say that there's no fighting in this era now, right? But he's not talking about 10 years before the end of the world, but people who have taken his words out of context in that sense have come up with this plan that there's never going to be any war. Like, there's going to be one, most likely, as we can see from the footnote, with Gog and Magog reappearing. They will attack submitters. So what are the submitters going to do? They're going to defend themselves. There's going to be war, right? So yeah, that's a good point. Mashallah. About what Justin said.
Yeah, mashallah. It's definitely a battle, right? It almost like I don't think there's a difference in difficulty. Like, lives are being lost regardless, souls are being lost regardless, and I think it's more subtle than ever, right? Beforehand, it was like blazing. You're like, okay, you're a disbeliever, right? The physical war, this mental warfare, this ideological war. It's much more subtle and a lot easier to be corrupted by, I think. But only God knows, right? Not saying one's more difficult than the other, just different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a mental battle now too, but some people don't even accept that, right? They think there's no war of any kind or no battle, and they think it's just discussion, I don't know if you've run into that.
Oh, brother, you've run into it with me. Let's be upfront, like there was a time. Well, like, I'm calling a spade, right? Like, I prescribe to an ideology that I prescribe to the falsehood that you have to be empathetic to absolutely everybody, which is not the case, right? Mm-hmm. Thank God we have the Quran that kind of guides us, and you put me in my place rightfully, and I appreciate it, right? By God's grace, I was able to get over my ego and realize where I was faulted, and to recognize that there is a war going on, right? But it's subtle; it creeps in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mashallah. I mean, we can see, like, for example, how the traditional Muslims, for example, when the mathematical miracle came out, how they bought all copies of the mathematical miracle and destroyed them, right? And so they have been constantly trying to subvert the message through all these tactics. And so obviously there's effort involved in that, there's money involved. And so these things continue on. Obviously, they didn't end with the messenger, right? And, people are still trying to fight the message. So praise be to God, for his guidance, inshallah.
Since the beginning, brother, they've been fighting it. Since Abraham's day, right? It continues. Like, it's like ever rolling, right? Like, everybody, we're no different. You see these examples in the Quran, right? They're beautiful examples because we see them in our lives still, right? The only thing that's changed is we have an iPhone to record our stupidity, right?
So are there any other comments from anyone? Any comments? Any questions? Yeah. By the way, I did say idiot. I didn't say idea. I was just joking.
Hey, do you know what? I'll be the first one to admit I have many idiotic thoughts.
So well, you're not an idiot. I'm an idiot.
Oh, it's all good, brother. Peace be upon you, 100%.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, I guess if there are no other comments or questions, then God willing, we can conclude our study. So thank you all for joining, and thank you, Brother Justin, for leading the study and for streaming. God willing, our next, and for everyone also who joined our study today on Discord as well. So God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. God bless you.